you want to be. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome up our first speaker. She is the queen of online and offline meaningful gatherings and connections. She is the creator of the Madrid Blogger Network, Madrid's largest community of content creators and bloggers, and she is the founder of She Refresh, a community for women over the age of 30 who want to change their life through travel. Please welcome to the stage, Seppi de Bibian.
So much. All right. It's great to see so many familiar faces in the crowd. Okay, so it was my first web summit. And as I sat at the dinner table with 10 incredible women in tech, I started to get anxious. As a social media marketer and community builder who helps women change their life through travel, I started to wonder, what was I even doing here? And what was my connection to tech? But before I could even think of anything to say, the intros around the table started. And as I listened, everybody just sounded so accomplished. And I just needed to sound worthy of being there. But before I knew it, it was my turn. And so I said, "Hi, my name is Seppi. I'm from Texas. I live in Madrid, and I have a little business called She Refresh. It's my side hustle." And as soon as those words, little business and side hustle, came out of my mouth, I cringed on the inside. But luckily for me, my friends at the table had my back, and they called me out in the kindest of ways and asked me to redo my intro as the boss woman that I am. So you see, assuming a new identity is a practice. And since that dinner in November, I've been practicing. But what I've learned on my own path to reinvention while living here in Spain is bridging that gap between who you are and who you want to become requires owning who you need to be. So a few months before that dinner, I had made my first big sale. And it was a 5-figure one, in fact. I had sold out my first ever retreat, and 10 women were coming from the US to Morocco to come spend a week with me, someone they had never met. So just making that sale validated that I had created something of value in my online community of over 5,000 women around the world. And we had even been mentioned in Forbes and USA Today. But why was I still so uncomfortable with referring to my new business as a business? Well, it's because I was struggling with becoming. And when I think of what reinvention means, reinvention is an act of becoming. And that's a process of becoming who you need to be in the world and how you want to be seen in the world. So for anyone out there who's trying to pave a new professional path, you got to get used to the idea of owning who you need to be. Is there anyone out there who struggles with this, for being who you need to be for your business? Some people? Okay, I see some hands. It's okay, I do too. I go through that. But just know, with each mini milestone of your becoming, you build another layer of confidence that will help you transform into someone that you can't even see yet, and it'll take you to places that you can't even imagine. Just a few years ago, I moved here to Madrid to teach English, and I can tell you, I never would have imagined that I'd be standing on this stage at Google for Startups speaking to all of y'all. And so I had to go through my own reinvention for this to even become a possibility and a reality. So, what does it take to do this? To become, to reinvent? Well, at the root of reinvention is self-discovery. And to discover ourselves, we have to be willing to play with our identity. And what I mean by that, playing with our identity, is just trying new things and going beyond what we expect of ourselves. And so we often think of our identity as this fixed structure around us that determines who we are and who we aren't. And we create this identity with the actions we take and the choices we make. And over time, we start to see ourselves as someone who does X, but not Y. And as the world watches, it reinforces this identity by also seeing us as someone who does X, but not Y. So what happens when you try to do something new and you try to move beyond this identity, that's when those feelings of fear and insecurity and doubt and self-consciousness come up. And what we do to try not to feel those things, we often choose to feel safe and stay safe within the walls of our identity. But just know that playing it safe keeps us from realizing our full potential, and it keeps us from becoming. So in order to become, we have to intentionally play with our identity. And this means you gotta let go of who you think you are. You gotta start making different choices and do different things so that you can pave a new path of opportunities for yourself. But of course, this is easier said than done, right? Trying new things is scary. Does anyone out there have stage fright? Where are my stage fright people? All right. Have you ever forced yourself to speak in public? Good. And for those that are still learning Spanish, have you ever gone to a meetup or a networking event in Spanish? Yeah. How did that feel, putting yourself out there and trying something new? It's scary. It's uncomfortable. But that's exactly what it takes to reinvent. You have to actively seek new things and say yes to people and to actions and to opportunities that are in alignment with your goals and interests, no matter how intimidating they are or how unworthy you feel. So when I moved here, I promised myself that I had to get out of teaching, and I gave myself 1 year or else I'd have to move back to the US. And so what I did is I applied to marketing jobs left and right, and despite everyone telling me that I would never get sponsored as an American, I scored a job with a Spanish startup. And I gotta tell you, that was the first time for me having that experience of trying on a new identity here that scared the living daylights out of me. Because first of all, I didn't understand why I even got hired. It was for a social media job, and at that time, my experience with social media was limited to just staying in touch with friends and family on Facebook. But I said yes to a position that I didn't feel ready for, and I accepted the discomfort that was gonna come with that. And it's because I was just so eager to change the path that I was on. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a struggle. I struggled with the ins and outs of adapting to a Spanish work culture, with working in a language that I was not comfortable in, and being managed to a team of 8 people when I had never managed anyone in my life. And so I felt like a fraud on a daily basis in my own skin. But I had to show up for myself, no matter how uncomfortable and how painful it was, and I had to try to become who I needed to be to succeed. And by becoming on a daily basis, I became. And that experience of committing to trying on a new identity, it just changed how I saw myself, and it changed what I thought was possible for myself. And so right there, my reinvention had started. And what followed were the most transformational years of my life. I had built the confidence from that experience to try so many new things. And so I started a blog. I had never written before, never done anything creative, and I called myself a blogger. I started a community to meet other bloggers, even though I had never built anything before, and I became a community manager. And with the little experience I gained in social media from that job, I owned my profession, and I started applying to new jobs, and I scored a full-time remote gig that paid double the Spanish job and 4 times what I made as an English teacher. And last, I created another community called She Hit Refresh, just as a hobby, and I called myself the founder. And before I knew it, I had created this global community that I was able to turn into a business last year. So by showing up as who I needed to be for each of these growth spurts, I became a new version of myself, and I created new opportunities. And not only that, I ultimately became more of who I really am. And it was hard, but reinvention is hard. And that's why you have to be intentional about it. Because if you don't, fear is going to hold you back from who you're meant to be. And who was I to become these things? You know, what would my friends think? And what if I failed? All those thoughts ran through my head, but I moved forward anyway. And I know that my reinvention is a direct result from being open to play with my identity. And when I really think about it, the reason why I was able to reinvent myself here in Spain in a way that I just couldn't in the US is because I really believe that moving abroad creates a fertile landscape for us to try on different identities and to have this identity shift. Because just being in a foreign environment and being in a new and having new experiences on a daily basis forces us to become someone new. I mean, here we're building a world in another language, and we're trying to understand how to navigate this new reality. And on top of that, we're also chasing new dreams and making different choices. So if you have any doubts in your ability to reinvent, just know that by moving abroad and by being here, you've already proven that you're the type of person who is already on a path to reinvention. And you already have what it takes to make it happen, right? Because you intentionally left your comfort zone and you purposely disrupted the path that you were on. I disrupted a perfectly comfortable path in Texas. I had a great life. I had everything. I had a house, car, great job, comfort, and routine. But for me, something was missing. I felt disconnected, and I was bored with the monotony of a conventional life. And so I needed a change, and I came here to make that happen. And as I've mentioned, since I moved here in 2015, I've been able to become many things. But I didn't dare attempt to become any of those things back in the US. And I think that's because I didn't have to. There was no need for me to reinvent myself because that conventional path was already paved out for me. And so by becoming here, I had to pave my own path to find a way out of teaching. And so on this path, I got to choose who I wanted to be. And that's a really beautiful thing about moving abroad, is that it's much easier here to explore these different sides of ourselves because we're surrounded by new people. That's powerful. We have fewer inhibitions because we aren't carrying the weight of our identity, that identity that we co-created with the people who knew us back home. Here we get a blank slate. We get to start over. And with that, you're more likely to try new things. And I bet you've probably already tried a few things here that you may have shied away from back home. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you to do so. Because every day that you intentionally and even unintentionally do new things, you start to build the confidence that allows you to hop off that hamster wheel of what you've always done and try out and test out these new versions of yourself. And the more that you do these things, the more you become. So if you remember, at the beginning of this talk, I said that bridging the gap between who we are and who we want to become requires owning who we need to be. And for me, that meant moving abroad, trying on these different identities, and embracing who I was becoming. So my ask of you, when you leave here and go back into your lives, is to please try on those different identities. Because reinvention means no more thinking small. You gotta go big. You gotta lean into the discomfort, and you gotta do things that you've never done, and you gotta do them over and over and over. And you gotta do them when you're scared, and you gotta do them when you don't know what you're doing. Because you have to create your own pressure to transform. And over time, these intentional changes and choices, they're gonna create opportunities that are gonna allow you to become who you need to be to rise to the occasion. And so since Web Summit, I've been trying on my new identity whenever I get the chance. And so this is the biggest crowd that I have tried this out in front of. So here we go. Hi, my name is Seppi. I'm from Texas. I live in Madrid. And I'm the founder of a business called She Hit Refresh.
Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause to Seppi.
Thank you.